Hello and welcome to episode 164 of The Pitcher or the Hitter, the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I am Cam,
I'm Sahil.
and you've talked a lot the last few weeks about some team needing to give Daniel and Matt their first win of the season, and it was very nearly you this week.
Yeah, oh God, not my week. We'll get into it when we talk about the matchups, but there's one reason I'm not as mad about this as I usually would be. And I'll explain why when we get there, but my team is just there's a lot going on with it right now. I really got my work cut out for me. But it's kind of exciting trying to figure out how the hell to get this all together. But um, we have a lot to talk about. It's been a hot second since we've last talked. One of the longer periods we've gone without a podcast. You have been in Canada, land of your
I
people,
have,
land of the can.
yeah,
Uh,
Land of the Can. I've been gone for 2 weeks. Had a great time. I got back yesterday. We are currently playing NCAA against each other right now. Um, I downloaded the game today. I am playing as SMU. You are playing as UNC. I am up 7-0, but I just completely shanked a field goal, so I'm getting that figured out. So you may hear some updates on that game as we go. But yeah, been a long time since we've recorded.
Yeah, kicking field goals is impossible in this game when you get it too deep out. The whole kicking thing is broken. They need to fix that. But yeah, it has been a while. Um, I've certainly missed it. It's been. I'm actually kind of thankful for the timing because we did have the long week. It did kind of help us not miss too much. But yeah, it is nice to get back in a rhythm. I don't know about you, Cam, but I don't have any reason why I would miss recording anytime soon. So I'm looking forward to us getting into a good rhythm here, especially as we reach the end of the season here, which is kind of hard to believe that we're getting close to the end. But
We are, yeah, kind of crazy. We're um only just a few, like 5 or 6 matchups left. The playoff field is definitely wide open. There's kind of a definitely a top four that exists, and then kind of four more that are fighting for the last few spots. So we'll see. And with the trade deadline coming up soon, both in real life and in fantasy, these teams, myself included, and yourself especially included, there's a lot that can be done to help out.
yeah, absolutely. But there have already been a few trades that have been made since we've been gone. Not as many as I would have predicted, but there are four trades that we have not talked about, varying sizes and shapes here. And let's get at it. First trade was made right after we recorded our last episode, so this one has been a couple weeks since it happened, but almost 3 weeks to be exact. But let's dig into it here. EBO traded Willier Abreu to Jake for Sal Stewart. And I'll let you start here because I believe Sal Stewart is a Reds prospect.
Yeah, South Stewart is a Reds prospect. He is a third baseman. I believe he's in high A, maybe double A. Um,
I think
I know
high.
he's in high A with, yeah, high A with Dayton. He's been solid this year. He's risen up some boards. I don't think he's a top 100, top 150 prospect or anything like that, but he's an interesting prospect. I feel like this trade would have maybe made more sense going the other direction. Uh, like Wilyer Abreu, young major leaguer, having a better season than I anticipated. Um, so I guess he's a solid get for Jake, and he's a Red Sox, so that's kind of a reason for Jake to get him. Um, I don't know what EBO is going to do with Sal Stewart, but they own him now. I don't really have any thoughts other than Wilyer Abreu's been better than I anticipated him having been.
Yeah, I think I had a different opinion when this trade first went down, but with kind of some more time to think about it, I've seen Stewart rise up some prospect lists. I don't think he's the worst ad. From EBO's perspective, you could certainly debate if you thought there was a better outfielder for them to trade, but I feel like Abreu's numbers are really um, kind of pumped up by a hot early start. He went for a long stretch there without like any homers, any RBIs, or stolen bases, I should say. I just like I think he's fine, but like I don't know if I look at him and think like God, like this guy's so awesome, like I have to have him. I think he's just kind of more of a you know bench bat. So
That's fair. And he's an interesting guy. If Jake likes him, then as a Red Sox fan, then I definitely get trying to trade for him as like a buy while the value is not terribly high. You're most likely out of the playoffs this year. Try and get some interesting young pieces to see if he sticks for next year. So I get it there.
right, he has the luxury to kind of explore some of these younger pieces at his own pace that he might not have otherwise been able to do if he was winning. And if one of them hits and becomes a big contributor for him next year, when from his perspective he hopes to be actually competing, then great. And if not, then he'll no harm, no foul. I mean, maybe Stewart turns into something, but it's the risk you take. Um,
Exactly. But yes, next trade was one of mine. Um, I traded Jacob Mizorowski, starting pitching prospect that I've. Oh, you should have just kicked the field goal there. Starting pitching prospect that I've owned for a little while. Um, Traded him for Ryan Helsley, a closer. I finally have an elite closer for the first time since Liam Hendriks kind of was no longer an elite closer, and I'm very happy to have him.
yeah, I like this a lot for you. What an interesting decision just to dive right there and you got hit. I like this
I don't
trade.
know how to slide. That's why.
Yeah. uh, Slowly figuring out the controls here. I don't have too much experience under my belt. I have just a little more than you, but clearly it's not doing much for me right now because you have the lead. But I think I'm playing getting a little too cute here. Um, um, where was I going with this? I like this trade a lot for you. I think it's like the fourth time I've repeated myself, but I Helsley's been really solid. I think I had some concerns initially because I was like, I think Helsley, I thought he was going to get traded because the Cardinals were doing bad. And then I was like, is he going to be a closer? Cardinals are doing a lot better. I don't think they're going to trade him. I did hear that he's dealing with a little bit of an injury issue. I think it was a hip, but don't quote me on that. And he has had a little trouble racking up quite a few, like a large amount of innings, even compared to for a standard reliever over the course of his career. And so I wonder if maybe they might cut back on his appearances a bit in the second half. But he is leading the league in saves. Like it's unquestionably a good ad, and I think that you're gonna really like him. I think Mizorowski is all the arm talent in the world, but he cannot um, um, control the ball. So I'm not. I, I think he's interesting, but I'm not looking at him as somebody you're gonna like really regret. Are you trying to kick like a 70? Oh my God, you had a fake field goal from like 70 yards out and you missed.
I think yeah, I didn't quite. Oh, I got the catch, but I was like a yard short. Um, it sort of worked. But yeah, my thoughts on the trade. I, Mizorowski, it's his second season in Double A. It hasn't gone the best. It's gone a little better than his first season in Double A, but not substantially. He's walking a ton of guys. I don't like pitchers that walk a ton of guys. That's why I ultimately didn't pick Hurston Waldrop in the first round last year. Um, and Ryan Helsley just really fills a need for me. Like I said, it's been just absolutely dreadful for my bullpen for long stretches, especially when Seawald hasn't been doing well or when he's been hurt,
He's
or
been
something like
awful.
that.
Have you seen he had like a .5 ERA going into the month, and that's like completely like turned around for the negative. He's like a 9 ERA this month.
Yeah, and I'm not like too worried about him. I think he'll turn around fine, but I like having Helsley for insurance there.
Yeah. No, I think that's very fair. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think from Daniel Matt's perspective, right, to trade a reliever away and when you're not competing, getting a pretty decent arm, I mean, talent, for all the concerns we have, he is still an elite arm talent as I just score a touchdown. Um, I think it's a decent gamble for him, so I don't have an issue with it for their
Yeah,
perspective. Also,
absolutely.
this is cheaper for you than having to go out and get a Josh Hader, which his price kind of skyrocketed, and I'm actually going.
Yeah, I was, yeah, that's kind of why I was waffling on Josh Hader and didn't end up pulling the trigger because I was hoping I could get this done here. Um, and I finally made my first ever trade with this team. I never this was the last team I hadn't made a trade with over the 7 years of our league, and I'm glad I was able to today, or whenever this was, 2 weeks ago.
Uh, but yeah,
Was it
it was 18 days ago.
18 days ago?
Yeah.
A bit of time. But yes, enough about this trade. We've got a couple more. Uh, EBO traded Mackenzie Gore to the jury for Jerkson Profar and the later of Sahil and Eric's 2025 first. So yeah, the jury are sending a first round pick, as well as Jerkson Profar for Mackenzie Gore. What are your thoughts on this one?
So Mackenzie Gore's kind of had a tale of two seasons. I think up until like his last like 4 or 5 starts, it was like a low threes ERA where he's cut down the walk rate, maybe giving up a few too many homers, but like overall pretty solid. Since then, he's been absolute dog shit. Um, Now I'm still a believer over the long haul. And I think that Daniel and Matt just need to ride the wave here and kind of recognize that better days are ahead. So I'm not really concerned for him. And I do think this is like a really good, they needed a good young pitcher, and I think that they got it. Um, I think from EBO's perspective, right, I think Gore was somewhat expendable with the rotation options that they have, especially in conjunction with this next trade that we'll talk about. And they really needed an outfielder. I think Profar, I don't think he's going to keep it up after this year. I have no expectation of that. He'd be a very much a sell high candidate for me in the offseason. But I think for this season, he's a great fantasy option, and getting that first round pick kind of gives them some backup if the trade, if Gore just completely breaks out. So, first round pick is valuable draft capital.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a good team to bet on Gore. Yeah, he hasn't been great, like you said, his last few starts. And they somehow EBO has a ton of picks, but they actually only have one first rounder this year, whereas Daniel and Matt have three. So that's kind of an expendable pick for them, especially considering they have their own pick, which they're hoping is number one. So that kind of makes sense there. Yeah, Profar is a good sell high for Daniel and Matt. I agree. They wanted a decently big price on him when I asked about him.
Yeah. No, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Um, Anything else in this trade? If not, I have a lot to say about this last trade.
Yeah, there's a big one, and I was away, so I never really got to look super closely at it and figure out what I feel about it. So why don't you dive in?
Yeah, it took you a couple days to even realize that the trade happened, but EBO traded Yuri Perez, Ryan Pepio, Chase DeLauder, Brady House, and Mark Hanna to Andrew Reynolds wrap for Brian Reynolds. So waiting for that team name change. Pablo Lopez, Ranger Suarez, Luis Rengifo, and someone called Hunter Barco, who I've literally never heard of. I do not get this for Andrew. I think this is a major win for EBO. Andrew's goal here was like, hey, it's time to retool. I don't mind the concept of retooling. Um, but I think he went about it completely wrong. You're trading away a 30-year-old Reynolds, a 28-year-old Pablo Lopez, who I get is having a bit of a down season, but he's been really back to normal lately. He's only 28 years old. Ranger Suarez, Luis Rengifo are both young pieces. and Hunter Barco. And like, if by retooling he was like, hey, I'm going to trade away a 31-year-old Kyle Schwarber, who is going to be util only next year, and I'm worried maybe about him aging with that body type. And he's like, hey, I'll trade Chris Bassett and traded like some guys like that, and Kirby Yates, and then he got like an interesting young piece back, even if it's not at the level of Yuri Perez. Like, I'd be all in on that for him. I think that's the type of retool that makes sense. Instead, he traded like a good chunk of his core away. And I don't think he got a return, commiserate to what he should have. I think Yuri Perez is a really interesting high upside guy, but he is coming off Tommy John, right? I mean, he is 21. He's proven himself a bit in the majors, but not like he hasn't completely established himself. I'm sure he's going to be on some innings limits or whatever else, room for a potential setback, right? I think Pepio's decent, but like I don't think Pepio is like gonna walk in and all of a sudden turn into like a top 10 starter. I think has the top 25 to 30 starter upside. And I know he's young and I get there's upside, but like, I, I don't know. And then what are the other two pieces here? I mean, DeLauder I like, and I think Andrew was like, hey, he wouldn't have made this trade if he didn't get DeLauder. And I know EBO also held him in high regard. Sully didn't really want to trade him, but like I don't think DeLauder or Brady House are like at the prospect level for me where like, I'm comfortable with that being the headline prospect to go give up that package. And then Canna's, obviously Canna, just kind of whatever. From the other side, right, I think Reynolds fills a huge outfield need for EBO. They were pretty thin in the outfield, especially with Kyle Tucker and Riley Green on the IL. And Reynolds is having a career year. I think Pablo Lopez has been better than he's played so far, and I'm not really worried about him in the long term. Um, Ranger Suarez already landed on the IL. I think he was due for a little bit of regression, and you know, I still think he's a solid fantasy asset, this even if there's some regression in there. I think Renhefo is a little underrated. He could play all four position, or he could play four positions. Um, Steals a fair amount of bases. I'll be curious to see what his role is if he gets traded at the deadline here. Maybe that decreases his value a bit, but I still think he's like 26. I think he's a nice add for EBO there. And just I don't know. I think from a value perspective, I think Andrew could have gotten a bit more, but I don't think it's so egregious to the point where I'm like, man, like he really screwed up. I just think that he should have gotten more. But from a team direction standpoint, I don't get it. I'm genuinely baffled.
It's tough because, you don't want to be giving up Ranger Suarez. You're just retooling instead of rebuilding. And Pablo Lopez, I mean, Andrew gave up two really good starting pitchers in a steal, and starting pitchers are hard to come by. And granted, he got two guys who could become very good starting pitchers, but it's a difficult thing to do when you're giving up two really good starting pitchers. Um, and I like a lot of the guys he got. Yuri Perez, I'm, concerned about how he's going to come back from the injury. His previous few starts before the injury weren't the best, regardless, although maybe he was playing a little hurt. DeLauder's great. Brady House is not having a particularly good season. He's still kind of back of the top 100 on some boards, but he's kind of falling down. Um, Granted, with a lower BABIP than he's put up in previous seasons. I'm just not super sure about him. Uh, uh, yeah, I'm not sure value wise. Yeah, I think EBO did great value wise and great to get some of these guys for their playoff push because they are pretty much now secured to be back in the playoffs and one of the top teams.
Yeah, I agree. And we'll kind of get to their place in the standings here in a second. I will push back and maybe this is changing my mind a little bit from what I said at the beginning. I don't mind Ranger Suarez moving as a retooling team. I think it's more Brian Reynolds and Pablo Lopez. Because I think you could argue, and I think argue correctly that Ranger Suarez is having like a career year right now. And his value is never going to be higher. And if you're retooling and you don't think this year is going to be your year, why not sell an asset that you think is going to depreciate after this year? Whereas I think Reynolds and Lopez I think Lopez's value is actually at a low point. Um, and I think Reynolds too, like, yeah, you could argue this is a career year, but it's not too far off what he's done previously, and I think this is plenty sustainable.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. But yeah, these two teams, yeah, EBO still kind of holding on to that first place spot despite the end of their matchup, which we'll talk about. Um, and yeah, Andrew kind of holding on to that last playoff spot. We'll see if it's either him or Ruthvik or even Jake that gets it.
Well, and I will
Uh,
say this too, Andrew is winning, or he's going to win this week. He jumps into a playoff spot despite selling. Oh, breaking news. Jazz Chisholm hurt in his first Yankees game.
oh God,
Rounding second in a 5-run game. Big for Anthony. Or a bit hurts Anthony, I should say.
big, yeah, big painful thing, I guess.
Big hurt.
A big Frank Thomas for Anthony right there. Ow, picked off.
Reception, and I think I'm going to
I
come up.
can, I cannot, just like in other games, I just can't stop throwing red zone picks.
It's hard. I try to run a bit more if I can in the end zone. But who are we talking about? We're talking about Anthony, right?
Yeah, I think we're ready to dive in the matchups though.
Yeah, yeah, I don't have anything else to say about this trade, but yeah, I think Zane, I think EVO is on this really hot trajectory right now. Now, what I will say is, uh, we talk about this all the time, right? Or you say this all the time. Never get too high or too low after a regular season win or loss, because once you get into the playoffs, everything changes. So to that point, don't peak right now. Um, you know, you want to peak in the playoffs, so you never know what's going to happen. But yeah, let's dive into these matchups here, and there's a lot to talk about in some of these matchups. A lot of close ones.
Oh, breaking. Yeah, looks like, as Anthony said in the chat, that matchup is not over because Rafaela can score the tying run, and he does bat third next inning. So EBO may have celebrated too early. I guess that remains to be seen. So we will not start with that matchup. Why don't we start with yours um, since you had a upset tie against Daniel and Matt. Sounds like you've got a lot to say there.
Yeah, are you trying to distract me while I'm trying to cut, or I'm trying to hold you from tapping the game? I'm kidding, but yeah. So I alluded to I tied Daniel and Matt. First up, shout out to Daniel and Matt. They had a very solid offensive week. Pitching, they were dog shit, but they had a better bullpen week than me. So they won those two categories, won fourth to sixth offensive categories. That did it for them. Uh, Kind of unfortunate for me. So one more double or one more steal, or two more home runs, and I would have won. As you know, have first and goal under a minute left. That was a big play. Um, I'm going to read to you. So I now have uh, just the players I lost this week, and I'll get to the whole
Push
list.
that.
Max Fried, Ozzy Albies, Christian Yelich, Freddie Freeman, Josh Naylor, and Brian Hudson. I lost those six players all over the course of this week, either to injury or, in the case of Freddie Freeman, his son. Did you see what's going on with his son?
I did not.
So he has something, it's a viral, some sort of infection or some sort of thing. It's luckily not a long-term thing. It's like some hip inflammation thing, but it literally prevents his son from like standing up or walking.
Oh,
Um,
Jesus.
so it's really messed up. So like he left the Thursday game early, or not early. He left right from the stadium to go stay with him in a hospital, flew to Houston for the game on Friday. He was in the lineup for the Friday game, and then they scratch him at the last second, and they're like, "Yeah, he's not coming back to Houston. He flew right back to LA." And he's pretty much been in with him ever since. So best of luck to the Freemans. But for
Jesus.
my
Yeah, let's
fantasy
hope
team,
so.
right? Yeah, for my fantasy team, Freeman's a big source of a lot of what I do. So that's not to mention too, Betts has been out, Tatis has been out. So like I think like four of my top six hitters, I'd say, have been out. Bradish, Woodruff, Bautista Jones. I have 12 players who are out, 8 IL spots. I had a garbage offensive week, but the fact that I was able to kind of keep it as close as I did in some of these offensive categories, I'll take a tie. It's not ideal. I didn't lose a ton of ground in the standings to some teams, and if EBO and Anthony do indeed tied, I won't lose any ground to them. So it's all about making the playoffs. I'm kind of in a shitty situation here with the injuries, but I think some of these guys are going to come back right at a timeline of closer to the playoffs. And my goal is just to tread water right now. But considering like six of my bats have been out and I haven't had room to like replace them, I just like it just kind of is what it is. If I had a fully healthy team and I was doing this against Daniel and Matt, I'd be pretty pissed. But oh God, no, I'm not kicking a 60-yard field goal. But I'd also like to give a shout out too, because this is going to get lost in a shuffle. Dylan Cease had his first career no hitter this week on my team. And I know you're going to be tempted to give the matchup MVP to someone on Daniel and Matt's team because they were kind of, it's an upset tie as you and I are playing overtime. I've not played overtime in this before.
Me neither. This is gonna be
Uh,
fun.
yeah. Okay, so let's do a coin toss here. I've won to toss. I want to defend because I think that's the way you want to do it, right? In college. I don't know. Um, but what I was saying was that oh no, maybe I am not defending first. Um, you should give it to him, even though I think you'd be tempted to pick someone from Daniel and Matt's team because they were uh kind of the upset here.
Yeah, well, I'll look through both teams and see who looks good. I will say, yeah, rough week for the guys who were healthy on your offense. Adley wasn't great. Joey Ortiz was not good. Jordan Westberg, not good. Trey Turner, not good. Angel Martinez, I guess you're rostering. He was not good. So rough week there, but great week for your pitching. Especially Cease, but also Bailey Ober, who made two quality starts, 15 Ks. The jury had,
He is good. I love him.
yeah, he is, yeah, definitely a great ad for you. He's a guy I've liked a lot too. Daniel and Matt's team, no real standouts on offense either. Austin Wells had a decent week. 8 RBI for Wanya Pez, who also doubled thrice. So good for him. Um, Pitching wise, they had a couple of really solid starts from Tyler Anderson. I think I'll give it to Cease though. He was really the best player on either team. No one really stood out on on that side to be worthy of any sort of matchup honors. But good for them. They've got their third tie. Have not yet won. They've got me this coming week, so maybe they can build some of this momentum to in their matchup against me.
Yeah, absolutely. Good for them for sticking in there. I thought the only player on my team you might consider giving it to over Cease was Bailey Ober, because he had two really good starts versus Cease's one. But I mean, with the no hitter, I think clearly the right choice. Back to back player matchup MVPs for Cease too.
Yep, back to back for Cease.
He
He's
is
just really on a heater now. Yeah.
I mean, like historic numbers over the last three starts. That trade's been awesome.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Anything else on your matchup before we get into another one?
Uh, no, no, I think I'm good. As Sedan Raphael is up now, so this is going to be interesting. And he struck out. Ooh, so EVO and Anthony are going to tie.
All
Uh,
right. Yes, that
I
tide's
just scored a
official. Yeah,
touchdown
let's
for you in overtime.
let's talk about their matchup now that that's officially in the books. It's a tie. Anthony gets his fourth tie of the year. To move to 9-4-4. EBO moves to 11-4-2. These teams, they're yeah, fought very hard. EBO's got the tiebreaker over them, I believe. And uh, not a great offensive showing for either team. I would say EBO got all right. Yeah, EBO scored 38 runs to Anthony's 37. Neither team broke 40 RBI or 12 homers. Uh, rough on base percentages for both teams, but they did steal a lot of bases, so that's pretty nice. EBO got a good week from Matt Chapman. Not really anyone else besides Chapman and Profar, who actually in his first full single week with this team put on a really good performance. 8 RBI, 7 runs, 414 OBP. Pitching wise, Tarek Skubal had a fantastic week with 2 quality starts. Looking at Anthony's team, also not great hitting. Ryan Mountcastle drove in 7 runs, though. Gleyber Torres was probably the standout with a couple of homers, 3 doubles, 6 RBI, and a 440 on base percentage. Anthony's pitching standout would have been Bryce Miller with 2 quality starts, 11 Ks. I think I will give matchup MVP. How about Gleyber? Gleyber contributed kind of across the board in a moderate to medium way, and a lot of these hitting categories were very tight, and Gleyber pushed him over the edge.
Yeah, no, I think that's yeah, good matchup MVP. I think you hit the nail on the head. I will give a little shout out to EVO here. It looked like Anthony was going to crush them in the early parts of the week, and they really clawed their way back. So kudos to them. It really came down to whip here at the end, and yeah, man, I mean, literally, like I think one more hit given up by Rodon, and that would have been it for EVO's chances to win. But yeah, I don't have anything else to say about this matchup. It seems like EBO is quickly amassing critical tiebreakers against the top teams, with the exception of you. So I think that's really good for them.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I feel very very happy to have that tiebreaker against them because really looking like I might need it. I'm half a game behind them. They've already got the tiebreaker over Erik currently, which they're currently tied for first, giving them the tiebreaker. Um, yeah,
Yep,
gonna be a very interesting end of the season. And it's always exciting to see EBO back in it.
absolutely. And speaking of ties, we've already talked about 2 of the ties this week. There was a third tie. Let's talk about Jake versus Alex and Zach.
Yeah, so we had 3 ties this week. I don't think we've mentioned that yet, but
I just realized it.
yeah, this
Like,
happened once before, I believe, in our first year of the podcast era, 2021. Made a big deal out of it. Um, it's always exciting when there's this many ties in a week. Jake tied Alex and Zach. Uh, Jake becomes the first team to 5 ties. Um, and yeah, another exciting tie for Alex over a 2022 finalist, and to kind of get that uh, win total looking a little bit better. Jake definitely could have feels like he could have won this one. If he had gotten a single save or another quality start, he would have had it. But in the end, it is a tie.
it's kind of wild to me he didn't really get a save considering some of the names he has, even with the Mason Miller injury. Did you see that one?
Yeah, he like punched something.
Yeah, yeah, like punched a table. I do know what you have and haven't seen out in the wilderness, but yeah, what a guy. Um, anyways, yeah, I think this is definitely kind of a winnable matchup for Jake. Um, Interesting the number of ties that he has. I mean, he just described his team as mid, and he is literally 500 right now. If he ties next week, he'll have the same number of wins, losses, and ties on the season.
That is great.
Yeah, he is mid. Give him kudos for hanging in there in what's been a tough season, but yeah, this just has not been his season. I fully expect him to have some sort of bounce back next year, although I do think he needs to make some changes. But yeah, just not not his year. But also shout out to Alex and Zach. I think this team's been playing a lot better recently. And really, if not winning matchups, they've certainly been a lot more competitive in them and no longer look like a complete pushover.
Yeah,
They
no, absolutely.
tied you a couple weeks ago, or their last four matchups now. Um, are a tie to Jake, a loss to EBO, but only 5-6 though, and then a tie to you and a tie to Ruthvik. That's really solid. Like
Yeah, no, they've had some good, definitely some good matchups against some solid teams, not looking like pushovers. The offense was great this week. Um, really strong week for Rafi Devers, once again. Good week for Xavier Edwards, who hit for the cycle. Three doubles for Wyatt Langford, an otherwise not so great week. Uh, good week for Toglia, good week for JJ Bleday. Uh, pitching wise for Alex, it wasn't quite as good. Um, although he did get a really good start for Logan Gilbert. Jake's pitching really shined though this week, despite the not so great offense. 10 Ks for Evaldi in a quality start. Um, uh, Good quality start for Kevin Gosman, who pitched a complete game, allowed 3 runs. 6 Ks for Griffin Canning and a decent start. Um, Blake Snell though, and I think as much as I want to give it to the upset guy, Blake Snell, uh, 2 quality starts, 19 strikeouts, buck 50 ERA, 0.83 WHIP. I think he's kind of back.
there are reports that the Orioles are very interested in acquiring him. I don't know. I don't know if my heart can take it. But yeah, I mean, he's looked really good since he's come off the IL. And yeah, he looks like vintage Blake Snow. Now, can he stay consistent? I don't know, but we'll see what happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And yeah, so that was the third tie of the week. There was a fourth matchup that came quite close to tying, but Andrew pulled out a narrow 6-5. All right, yeah, narrow 6-5-1 victory over Ruthvik. Ruthvik drops out of the playoff picture. Andrew jumps him in the playoff standings. Uh, Another not so great hitting week for either team. Maybe a little bit better for Andrew. But uh, great pitching for Andrew, whereas Ruthvik's pitching was just absolutely dreadful.
yeah, and so I can. We talked about how Andrew decided to go and retool. I think the team that should have went down the retool path was Ruthvik because I think they had the same record going into this week, but there's one team that was playing substantially better than the other, which is evident by the roto, and that was Andrew. So I'll I'll give Ruthvik some credit here, kind of in the same way that EBO came back. Andrew really came back. It was not, or Ruthvik came back. It was not this close early in the week. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't really know what the next direction is for Ruthvik here. I feel like he's kind of a little bit in purgatory here. Um, on one end, he was in the semis last year, right? It was him and Andrew and
Does it not let
me
me
and
kick here?
uh no, because it's the second overtime.
You're not allowed to kick the field goal in the second overtime?
I guess not.
Oh, weird. All right, go ahead.
There's a penalty if you don't get it off. I'll just decline it. Oh, you got it off.
There you go.
Oh, I didn't catch. Just saved your ass. Nice. I don't like that. But anyways, I don't even know where I was. Um,
Uh,
oh, Ruth Fix in Purgatory. Like, on one hand, he was in the semis last year, right? On the other hand, this team does not look like it's equipped to make a playoff run. And I think he should sell. I think he's kind of made a valiant effort to kind of put something together, but I think he should sell at this point. I think you could get a lot back for a couple of the older players, and like rebuild around J-Rod and a couple other guys. And I think you have to go for two here, by the way.
Yeah, looks like it.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it's time for him to rebuild
I
or
think,
retool.
yeah, I think so. I don't think he will, but he definitely needs to make some sort of change to his team. Um, I mean, the pitching was just atrocious this week. Michael Waka gave up 3 runs in 4 and 2/3. Um, Johan Duran got blown up a couple times. It was really the bullpen doing badly, but Nick Pivetta also gave up 7 runs in 2 and 2/3. Barrios wasn't great either. Seth Lugo wasn't great. So just, yeah, not the best performance there. Looking at Andrew's team, though, he played well. Uh, Not a ton of pitching quantity from either team, but um, but his 4 quality starts for Andrew were really solid. Ben Lively made a good start, a lively start. Nick Lodolo pitched really well. Jamison Tyone, who I know he's shopping, made a good start as well. Hitting wise, matchup MVP though has to be Ketel Marte, who is having a really solid season. Homered 4 times, drove in 11 runs, scored 7 times with 458 OBP. Really helped carry Andrew's offense. This one really could have easily been like 9 to 2 to 1 or or something like that. A lot of the hitting categories were very close, and just Ruthvik barely held on to some of them.
Yeah, no, I think Andrew might have played a bit better than the record indicate or than the final score indicates. Oh man, this might be it for me in our little college football playoff game. But yeah, Andrew advances to a playoff spot here, and Ruthvik drops out. And another big one for the tiebreaker. Ooh, ooh, oh, touchdown. Okay, this is gonna determine whether or not we so Cam went for the Jalen Milrow and decided to just run for it QB draw style with a 2 point conversion. Ooh, if not, this is going to come down to third overtime here. That kind of yeah, I got
You got it.
it. Yeah. 29-27 UNC over SMU in an
Double
elite
overtime.
football matchup, double overtime. Cam, what a great matchup. I
Man, I
think
thought I had you a couple times.
yeah, indicative of how close some of our matchups were in the Dynasty Baseball League this week.
True, although yeah, absolutely. Although in this one you ended up uh pulling it out, unlike in Dynasty Baseball. But anyway, yeah, that was uh yeah, Ketel Marte, great week for Andrew. Anything else on this matchup?
No, and now that this game's over, I think we'll be a bit more organized here. Uh, let's dive into your matchup. That's the next closest matchup.
Yeah, let's do it. I had an 8-4 win over Conor. I was really not setting my lineup much. I had even less signal than I thought I would. But I was able to pull out a fairly comfortable win. I had 3 quality starts on the week. I benched 2 on Sunday once it became clear Conor was not going to try and stream to tie me there. So I wanted to save ERA and WHIP, and that I did. But uh, but those starts from Keller and Hauk would have helped my numbers look a little bit better. Uh, we were kind of 2 of the only teams that had good offensive weeks this week. I scored 54 runs, 21 homers, 59 RBI. Very happy with how my team hit. Um, uh, I also haven't pitched this well in a while, and I didn't pitch great, but I pitched better than I have in a really long time, I feel like. It's just kind of been rough out there for me, and I'm starting to get pitchers back. Um, Looking down the line, I got a really solid start from Framber, a really solid start from Zach Wheeler, who's kind of pitching well again. Framber had kind of a rough middle of the season, but he's made 4 really solid starts in a row now. And then his first full week on my team, Ryan Helsley got a save, which helped my team out. Hitting wise, Francisco Lindor drove in 10 runs and homered 5 times. Um, Juan Soto was great. Vlad was great. Um, Jackson Merrill was really solid. Didn't homer, but had a good week. Aaron Judge drove in 7 runs, homered 4 times. I think I'll give matchup MVP to Lindor because although the OBP was lower, he did have the 10 ribbies, homered 5 times, and stole a couple bases too, which um, always helps. As for Conor, he only started 3 pitchers all week. Um, and out of them, Cal Quantrill pitched well, and Andrew Abbott did not, and Kyle Gibson was somewhere in the middle. Hitting wise, he was pretty solid. Jorge Soler walked 11 times and had 595 OBP. Verdugo had a decent week. Orlando Arcia had a decent week. But overall, I mean, he had 18 strikeouts all week. He barely even qualified in ERA and WHIP. He did get 6 holds somehow, so the bullpen's working for him. But I would say it was a pretty comfortable win for me, all things considered.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I don't really have much else to add. I think you did a good job. And yeah, you are certainly progressing really well. I think your team is just kind of on a pretty decent roll here. And I think if you just keep doing what you're doing, you're going to be in good shape. So, and you're getting healthier on the pitching side.
I
So,
am. That is true. And almost all of my losses this year have been kind of weird in some way. Like
yeah.
Anthony, I led all week. It was the long week. I led all week, and then he kind of flipped some hitting categories on Sunday to beat me. When I was in the dark. Um, Andrew had a last minute win over me. Jake had a last minute win over me. So a lot of weirdness, and I feel good about my team that I'm doing well, but maybe not necessarily peaking.
Yeah, no, I think that's sorry, I think that's well said. I think you're just kind of steady. I think you've been the most consistent team recently. I'll say even as EBO has been getting some of these wins, I think Zane's the first to admit that they could be playing a bit better. Whereas I think your team has been pretty consistent throughout. I think the only team that has probably been slightly more consistent actually is the next team that we should talk about here, and they won 11-1. That is Erik over Yuki. I mean, Erik just 22 steals actually. I think he might have broken his the all-time steals record or tied it. It's certainly a top 2 steals week in league history, if not number 1. And he has broken a stolen base record that Andrew set in week 11.
How about
Uh,
that? Yeah, 22 stolen bases. Yeah, and Eric uh just kind of had a stupidly good week all around. Um, Basically every category except for saves and holds was just like an elite tier number. Um, Especially steals, quality starts, ERA whip. Uh, just just a fantastic week. I don't even really know where to begin with him.
no, I think Erik might team to beat. There's been a lot of chatter about EBO, but Erik's a silent killer. I think Erik's got to be the team to beat.
I think he is too. I just fantastic week. I mean, let's just run down the hitters. Vinny P had a 480 OBP. Um, Otani, 6 ribbies, 4 steals for Otani, and a 438 on base. A couple of homers too. Um, Brent Rooker drove in 8 runs. Ellie stole 7 bases. 455 OBP, although didn't hit for as much power. Lane Thomas, 3 steals with a great OBP. Uh, But I think I've got to give it to Hunter Green, though, matchup MVP. 14 shutout innings with 12 Ks, 2 quality starts, only allowed 4 hits and 4 walks. I mean, as good as some of these hitters hit, it was just, I'm love what I've seen from Hunter Green lately.
Yeah, he is. I'll give him credit. I kind of thought he was never really going to quite develop into a top tier starter, and he is on his way, I think.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Um, yeah, look at him go. As for Yuki's team, he had one of the better weeks this week. He would have beaten a lot of teams, but just kind of ran up against a buzzsaw. He hit decently well. I'll give a shout out to Randy, who is now a Mariner, but he stole a couple bases with a good OBP. Brandon Lau was good. Um, Isaac Paredes, Yuki's got his raise, but two of them are no longer raised. Rosarena and Paredes now. He might.
And,
Oh, who?
and Zach Eflin.
Oh, Zach Eflin. Yeah. Pete Fairbanks. Is Pete Fairbanks still a Ray, or is he gone?
For now, I think he's going to get traded, I'm sure, before Tuesday.
Gotcha. Yeah. So we'll see if Yuki jumps ship from the Rays.
It
Um,
looks like he is. I mean, he did send out a chat. Like, it would not surprise me.
yeah. The Fairweather fan Yuki with his Rays.
Is there such thing as a fair weather Rays fan? Is
Good
that
question.
it feels like an oxymoron?
Yeah, there's not a lot of fair weather for the Rays. But yeah, so that's an 11-1 victory for Erik. He remains in second place. Anything else we want to do in regards to these matchups before we move on?
No, let's move on. Matchup of the week or sorry, matchups. Yeah, matchup of the week, matchup to watch. There's two playoff team v playoff or two relevant v relevant team matchups. I'm gonna give the upper hand here to EBO v Andrew. Um, I think obviously the Brian Reynolds trade's kind of hanging over them having just happened, and this is the first full matchup for either team since that. So that's certainly going to be an interesting angle, but also, EBO's in the middle of a tough stretch. They just tied Anthony, so they're able to kind of, keep their standing here. But can they take even another step here to lock down a higher seed, or can Andrew kind of solidify himself as one of the top six playoff teams?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's definitely a good uh matchup to watch here in week 18. Um and then yeah, the other relevant be relevant team um is Erik versus Ruthvik. Erik could kind of end Ruthvik's season here, or Ruthvik can get back into it with a big win over a good team.
Yeah, I'm not holding my breath that he is going to do it the way Eric's been playing, but it would be a huge upset that I think the entire league would welcome if Ruthvik can pull it off.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But yes, shall we pick them?
We shall pick them, and I don't have to go through the pick 'em from the last one because we did not pick last week's matchups.
We did
Um,
not pick last week. Yeah, let's pick though. I think I'm maybe winning.
yeah, I think you pick first, but let me get over to our little sheet. I have now done what I usually do when we record, and I was playing the show instead of opening uh their weekly predictions tab. Here we go. Um wow, yeah, it has been a hot sec. This is about to be week 18. Okay. Cam, whenever you are ready, good sir, make your picks.
All right, I think I will beat the Drury. I think that Jake will beat Connor, although it might be kind of close. I think
In-
Anthony.
Interesting that you say it's close. Sorry.
I think so. I think Connor had a. If Connor's paying attention, then Connor will have a good week against Jake and have a good chance of winning. If not, then maybe not. Um, I think Anthony will beat Yuki. I think EBO is going to beat Andrew. Um, I think, and the last one is you versus Alex and Zach, and I think you're going to beat them.
Gotcha. Okay. I will pick you to beat Daniel and Matt. I'll pick Jake to beat Connor. I'll pick Anthony to beat Yuki. I'm gonna go with an upset here. I'm gonna pick Andrew to beat EBO. I'm gonna pick Erik to beat Ruthvik. And I'm gonna pick Alex to beat me. I think he's been playing a lot better recently and tying a lot of these teams, and I think he's gonna actually pull off an upset win at some point. Plus, he's already beaten me once this season, so or tied me. He has certainly shown the ability to play me tough.
Absolutely. And breaking news, and our call is about to run out of time. But since we've talked about his team, Ruthvik has announced that he's ready to retool, which, that's what you want him to do.
Yeah, that's literally what I just called for him to do. So, good for him. I'm curious what he does sell. I know he has some older pieces that would make for some interesting pieces for a contending team to acquire. Christian Walker is one name I could think off the top of my head. Maybe like a Joe Musgrove. I know he put Santander on the block. That's someone who's certainly having a career year that he can move. So it'll be interesting. I'm excited for him.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Curious to see what a Ruthvik rebuild or retool looks like. And yeah, maybe one more playoff contender out of the mix.
Yeah, perhaps that is the case. Um, excuse me. Well, all right then. Unless you have anything else, I think that wraps us up here. Good to have you back from the land of Can, and that you weren't arrested for arson. And glad to have you back.
All right, yeah, glad to be back, and we will see you next week. We're back on that regular recording schedule, at least until the end of the season. And yeah, we'll talk to you soon.
Yep. Talk soon.
I should've kissed that girl in the lobby, only on my mind, like all of the time. Yeah, I should've kissed that girl in the lobby, only on my mind, like all of the time. I regret words that I never said, like holds my hand. Can you drop me a line?
This podcast is good.